My best friend ditched me for his manipulative girlfriend. Now she's destroyed his life, and we're suing her with help from her latest victim. I, 27M, have known Jake, 28M, since we were 10 years old. He wasn't just my best friend, he was family. Growing up together, we always had each other's backs through breakups, crappy jobs, and every dumb mistake. It felt like we were brothers, the type of bond you think nothing and no one could ever break. But then, 3 years ago, he met Vanessa. From the start, something felt off about her. Vanessa had this magnetic charm, the type that could draw a crowd with just a look. She was beautiful, confident, and had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, until you weren't useful to her anymore. I didn't want to judge her right away, though. I tried to keep an open mind because Jake seemed completely taken with her, and I wanted to see him happy. I told myself she'd prove herself over time. But that never happened. It didn't take long before Jake started to change. He'd cancel on plans we'd made for months, or he'd show up late and distracted, constantly texting her. The worst part was how he'd defend her behavior, even when it was clearly toxic. She was always the priority. One evening, we were at our favorite bar for my birthday. Jake promised he'd be there on time. We'd planned this out weeks in advance, just the two of us, like old times. But an hour in, he's still nowhere to be found. I text him, and he replies, "Sorry man, Vanessa's upset about something." Rain check. It hit me then that this wasn't a one-off. She'd gradually taken over every corner of his life, and she didn't care about anyone else who mattered to him. I wanted to tell him how I felt, but I bit my tongue, figuring he'd realize it himself. The red flags kept piling up. Jake called me one day, sounding weirdly nervous, and asked if he could borrow $500. He mentioned some emergency, but wouldn't go into detail. I gave it to him, no questions asked, because that's what friends do, right? But then it happened again and again. Always emergencies, always vague. Finally, I pressed him for details. Turns out Vanessa had convinced him to loan her money for some business she was starting. Something about cosmetics. He was vague on the specifics, but I could tell he didn't even know what he was investing in. She'd put him on this guilt trip, making him feel like he didn't support her dreams if he didn't cough up the cash. The worst part, she never paid him back. Every time I'd bring it up, Jake would get defensive. He'd insist that Vanessa just needed a boost, or that it's not as bad as it seems. He started pulling away even more. And in some twisted way, I felt like I was losing both my friend and my patience with him. Everything hit the fan one night about a year ago. We were all at a mutual friend's wedding, and it should have been a night of celebration. I'd honestly hoped Jake and I would get some time to reconnect, maybe bring up some of the issues between us. But Vanessa was there too, looking bored out of her mind the entire evening. She barely even acknowledged anyone else. During the reception, Jake was practically glued to her side, fawning over her like she was royalty. Vanessa didn't just ignore me. She actively made these snide comments about my single life, implying I was immature for not being in a real relationship like theirs. At first, I laughed it off, but she kept going, almost like she was taunting me. Finally, after a few drinks, I told her to back off. She smirked, looked me dead in the eye, and said, maybe Jake wouldn't need to be here if his so-called friends were actually there for him when it counts. It felt like a slap. Jake didn't say a word. He just looked at his shoes, avoiding eye contact. I felt something snap inside me. In front of everyone, I told her she was manipulative and that she was the reason Jake's life was falling apart. I was tired of staying silent. Jake grabbed my arm and dragged me outside. We got into a shouting match on the sidewalk. He accused me of not understanding Vanessa, of being jealous of their relationship. Jealous? I'd supported him through everything. And now he was throwing me away for someone who treated him like a wallet. We left on horrible terms, and I didn't hear from him for months after that. A few months ago, I got a call from him out of the blue. His voice was shaky, and I could tell something was seriously wrong. He started to talk, but he was barely making sense. Apparently, Vanessa had convinced him to take out a loan for Herb Cosmetics' business. She'd promised to pay him back once it took off, but the business was a sham. When she couldn't squeeze any more money from him, she left him for some guy who was already well off. Jake was completely broke. Worse than broke. He was in debt, with creditors calling him and threatening legal action. She hadn't just drained his bank account. She'd taken his credit, his peace of mind, and all his self-respect. After listening to him go on and on about how he should have seen it coming and how she just needed him, I couldn't hold back. I told him I had warned him, that everyone around him had warned him, but he'd chosen her manipulation over the people who'd been there for him since day one. He fell silent, and I knew he was crying. It broke me, honestly. Since then, he's been trying to repair things. He calls, texts, even showed up at my door once looking like a wreck. He's begged me for forgiveness, saying he realizes now that Vanessa never cared about him, that she only used him as a stepping stone. He's admitted that I was right about everything, but it feels hollow. He's not just sorry for what he did to me. He's devastated by the reality he's left with. He wants his friend back, wants everything to be like it was. I don't know if I can go back to that. There's this bitter part of me that feels like he only sees my worth now because he has no one else. He let this woman trash his life, disrespect our friendship, and push everyone away. And now he wants me to just let it all go. Part of me wants to forgive him and rebuild, but another part of me feels like a safety net he only values when he's falling. Now here's my dilemma. I told him I needed time. I'm working through the hurt, but I'm not ready to jump back into our friendship like nothing happened. It feels like I lost my best friend years ago, and I don't know if the person he's become can be that friend again. We've met up a couple of times since then, but I'm keeping him at arm's length. I'm done being the person who gets taken for granted. If he wants me in his life, he's going to have to show that he values me for who I am, not just as a backup plan when things go wrong. So here's my question for you guys. Should I forgive him? Should I give him the chance to prove himself, to try and rebuild what he tore down? Or is this one of those situations where you have to cut your losses and move on?
Update. I decided to help my best friend after his ex left him broke and alone. We're taking her to court, and even her new boyfriend is on our side. So, after a lot of soul-searching and some pressure from this thread, I decided to give my friend Jake a shot at rebuilding our friendship. I knew it wouldn't be an easy road, but he seemed genuinely remorseful and was doing everything to make things right. It wasn't just a quick apology. He was actively working to prove he'd learned from his mistakes, and I respected that. Jake was still buried in debt from the loans he took out to fund Vanessa's fake business, and he was struggling to even pay for basic living expenses. I offered to help him find a job, and after a few weeks of applying everywhere, he landed a position as a customer service rep. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something to help him start climbing out of the hole Vanessa left him in. But even with a job, he was barely keeping his head above water, and we both knew he needed more than just a steady paycheck to recover. That's when I decided to call in some backup. A good friend of mine, Lisa, is a lawyer who specializes in small claims and contract disputes. I reached out to her, explained the whole story, and asked if there was any way to pursue legal action against Vanessa. Jake had bank statements showing the loans he took out, along with messages from Vanessa thanking him for his support and promising to pay him back as soon as her business took off. According to Lisa, this could actually be enough to make a case. We gathered all the evidence, bank statements, text messages, everything. Lisa agreed to draft a formal demand letter, which we sent to Vanessa, requesting immediate repayment of the loans. Unsurprisingly, she ignored it completely. So, Lisa advised us to move forward and file a lawsuit. We knew it would be a long shot, but it was better than doing nothing. While all this was happening, Jake and I started running into Vanessa and her new boyfriend, Matt, around town. It wasn't intentional, but the area we live in isn't huge, and it was bound to happen. Every time we saw them, she would give us this smug smile, as if she'd completely moved on and wasn't the least bit worried about what she'd done to Jake. I could see the hurt and anger building in Jake, so one day, I suggested we talk to Matt directly. If Vanessa had scammed Jake, chances were she was pulling the same tricks with her new boyfriend. It wasn't just about getting even. I genuinely didn't want to see someone else get screwed over by her manipulative games. We decided to approach Matt and give him the full story, along with the evidence we'd gathered. The opportunity came one afternoon when Jake and I spotted Matt sitting alone at a coffee shop. We walked over, introduced ourselves, and told him that we had some important things to discuss about Vanessa. At first, he looked confused, maybe a bit defensive, but he agreed to hear us out. Jake started by telling him everything Vanessa had done to him, the manipulation, the guilt trips, and the money she'd taken under the pretense of starting a business. I chimed in, backing Jake up, and then we pulled out the text messages and bank statements as proof. We were straightforward but calm, and as we showed Matt the evidence, I could see his expression shift from disbelief to horror. "I don't know what to say," he finally admitted, running a hand through his hair. "This actually sounds like things I've been noticing too." He went on to explain that Vanessa had already started asking him for money, hinting that she needed help with a new venture she was working on. She'd guilted him a few times, and he'd already given her a few $1,000s, but he hadn't questioned it because, like Jake, he thought he was just supporting her dreams. It was like watching history repeat itself. Matt went quiet for a long time, processing everything we'd told him. Finally, he looked up and said, "I think I need to end this before she does the same thing to me." He thanked us for warning him, and we left, hoping that this might be the beginning of some justice for Jake. A couple of days later, Jake got a message from Matt. He'd ended things with Vanessa and wanted to help us in any way he could. He admitted that he'd been feeling something was off with her for a while, but our conversation confirmed it. Now he wanted to make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. Matt offered to testify in court, sharing his experiences with Vanessa and how she'd started using the same manipulative tactics on him. He had his own evidence, texts from her asking for money, her promising that it would pay off soon and that he just needed to trust her. With his testimony, our case became much stronger. With Lisa's help, we moved forward with the lawsuit. We filed in small claims court, seeking repayment for the loans Jake had taken out on Vanessa's behalf. The day of the hearing, we showed up with every piece of evidence we'd gathered. The loan records, the text messages, and now Matt's testimony. Having him there made a huge difference. It showed a clear pattern of behavior, that Vanessa wasn't just someone who'd borrowed money once. She was a serial manipulator. When Vanessa showed up, her confidence was gone. She looked rattled, probably because she hadn't expected us to follow through, and certainly hadn't expected to see Matt standing with us as a witness. The judge listened to everything: Jake's story, the evidence, and Matt's testimony. Vanessa tried to twist things, claiming that Jake had given her the money as a gift and that Matt's story was irrelevant. But with the texts showing her promises to repay, her lies started to fall apart. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor. Vanessa was ordered to repay the full amount that Jake had taken out in loans, plus some additional damages. It was a huge win, not just financially, but emotionally. Watching her finally face consequences for everything she'd done felt like a weight lifting off both our shoulders. I won't pretend everything is magically perfect between Jake and me now. There's still a lot of healing to do, and trust takes time to rebuild. But going through this process together has helped. It reminded me of the friend he used to be, someone who would stand up for himself and for others, even if he got lost along the way. I'm hopeful that, with time, we can fully move past what happened. As for Vanessa, last I heard, she was leaving town. I don't know if she'll ever stop using people, but at least Jake and Matt are free from her. And in some strange way, I feel like Matt's friendship with us was something positive that came out of this whole mess. Looking back, I'm glad I gave Jake a chance to make things right, even if it was hard. Sometimes people do genuinely change when they hit rock bottom, and it was worth seeing him take responsibility and fight back. We're rebuilding one step at a time, and for now, that's enough.